right now we're going to talk all about standards and regulation. Well, we've been talking a lot about regulation, and a lot of people that we've interviewed here on Sibos TV keep talking about what SWIFT can do and the role that standards can play in helping them navigate this regulatory framework. Well, joining us to discuss this now is Kevin Hostoon. He is global co-chair of the Global Technical Center Fix Protocol, and also with us is Natasha de Terran, Head of Public Affairs at SWIFT. But thanks so much for joining us. Let's talk a little bit about what we've been hearing so far at Sibos TV in the last couple of days. I think almost everybody that I've spoken to said there is definitely a role for SWIFT to play in helping us to navigate all the things that we have to do with regards to regulation.
Well, I hope so. Now that's a monumental task. There's a vast amount of regulation coming out in a multitude of forms across the world, and not all of that regulation is compatible the one with the other. It's also coming out piecemeal in different orders from different jurisdictions, and even within single jurisdictions, it's coming out bit by bit, which makes adherence and implementation and planning, simply the planning factor, very, very difficult.
Yeah.
But any role that SWIFT can play within that, we're more than happy to play.
Yeah. Let's tell you just how, you're talking about one of those jurisdictions is the UK. Kevin just handed me this report by the UK government. I mean, you know, I'm going to need my Superman reading skills to get through this in the next couple of minutes or so. But basically, what's it really saying?
So the report was something that the UK Government Office of Science put together over the last 18 months, which looks at the scientific evidence around computer-based trading. We concluded that sort of computer-based trading does contribute, and there are certain problems, and there are tools that can be used to address some of those problems. One of the tools that we felt could be used was standards. So one of the conclusions of the report is that standards should play a larger role. If you look at how other industries are regulated, so you look at, for example, the European framework for ICT regulation, standards are an integral part of that framework. Standards are known at the policy level as one of the tools that they should be using. They're known at the strategic level as one of the tools they then plan to use, and then they're used at the actual tactical level where firms like SWIFT, enterprises like SWIFT, enterprises like FPL, and I mean that enterprises in the loosest possible world, you know, are the people who are tactically implementing these standards in the field. I think a second thing where SWIFT can help, not so much as a standard setter, but more as a commercial organization, is that if you look at a lot of the regulations that are coming down, they are expensive, but they are not differentiating. So a bank's know your client rules are not going to give them a competitive advantage over a second bank's KYC rules. And if you look at where we are in the economic cycle, we're at the beginning of it, we're in the middle of a deleveraging. The corporates are midway through deleveraging. The sovereigns are only really starting, particularly in Europe. And at the same time, capital is becoming, banks are having to hold higher and higher levels of capital to satisfy regulations such as Basel III. It means that, you know, ideally we should be developing the solutions to those as shared tools, possibly from an outsourcing arrangement.
Well, I think, I mean, I agree with everything, everything that you say on that. I think, I mean, this is a UK policy document. The UK...
It's not policy, it's government advice.
Government advice.
Advice to the government.
Right. But I think generally in these advisory documents and in policy documents, we tend to see a lot promoting the use of standards and the adoption of standards and international compatibility. But when it comes down to the very politicized rulemaking and legislative process, that doesn't always survive. And I think maybe SWIFT's role is in the aftermath where we can help to achieve some of the ends that were originally sought.
Okay, we're now also joined by Mark. Again, the magic of television. Mark Vail joins us. He is T2S Program Manager at the ECB. Thanks very much for joining us. What do you make of what you've been hearing so far, and what role standards can play in helping people navigate the regulatory framework?
Well, first, thank you to invite me. Good morning. Yes, standards have a very important role, I think, in the way we can organize and structure the market infrastructure. We take the benefit of doing new infrastructures to input new standards into the market. It allows to, throughout the financial industry, organize and structure the way data will be flowing in between the parties, should it be for regulatory reporting or for the purpose of simply organizing the business and settling the securities transaction in the case of T2S, for instance. And the fact that we use a transversal standard as much as possible, like ISO 20022, which is being now developed and implemented in all segments of the financial industry, we are able, I think, to support the future needs that will come from the regulatory developments which are coming as an outcome of the financial crisis.
Okay. Are there any best practice examples in standards that you would like to draw on or to tell us about?
I think rather than an example, it's a sort of a wish list type thing. I think we all find in developing standards that we don't get enough stakeholders engaged in the initial formation of the standard. So if you look at the stakeholders that we see as FPL, we see representation from a limited number of buy-sides, we see representation from exchanges, we see representation from the sell-side communities. We see much less participation from the wider buy-side, we see much less participation from other stakeholders, so stakeholders that aren't directly involved in financial services, and one group who are almost absent is actually the regulators. And it would be great to get the regulators along as stakeholders as part of the governance process, and I think that's a best practice which doesn't currently happen, but we could try to build.
Natasha, do you want to come back on that?
Well, I mean, I think regulators with free time at the moment are probably pretty scarce animals. That said, I mean, I think that generally, I mean, I don't know if Mark calls himself a regulator or not, but he certainly comes from that community. I mean, I think generally that they accept the benefits of standards. I think enforcing them at a detailed rule-making level is somewhat more difficult, except in specific sort of enterprises like you've been involved in, Mark, and there it's easier because it's...
Well, yeah, indeed, I'm not as a regulator here. I am as an operator of a platform and using standard as a way to implement. But I do believe that regulators, including central banks in this case, are more and more aware of the benefit of the usage of standard. As I was saying, this transversal approach to use as much as possible standard which are reusable on the whole line of industry financial services is something which will be very useful in this context. When, let's say, acting as operator, we are particularly careful. I mean, you have seen, for instance, so T2S is one of those. Target 2 just mentioned that they are going to move to ISO 20022 as well, so reusing this. We hear globally also that it is moving in the US. DTCC is implementing similar standard for also activities which are related to financial information. So this is really going all over the organization. And with the push of the regulator, it takes another dimension. And so certainly, yes.
Okay, well, we've got to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us, all of you.